Hello?
Hello.
Hi.
Excuse me. Good morning.
Good morning. How are things going there?
Pretty good. I think we're going to try to, I think Anson may stop by. We're kind of attempting to, go to a cafe and sit and talk. But we'll see what happens. Either way, it might not work. It may just be me, as usual. So we'll find out.
Okay.
But
Good. I'd like to, I look forward to seeing him if he can make it. So welcome to the meeting if you're watching on YouTube. We have a bunch of things to talk about today. We have an upcoming presentation that needs some attention. We have talk about maybe some summer planning. I have some papers, some features, all that. So I'm going to go first over, why don't we start with the Slack review, because I think we've had a little bit more activity this week. And I'll share my screen. So this is the Slack, of course. This is our group sort of hive mind. And so what do we start in cognition futures? I think that's the first place we've had activity this week. So we have Jesse posted this paper from SciArchive on integrated world modeling theory. And this is expanded implications for theories of consciousness and artificial intelligence. And so this is a preprint. Adam Safran put this up. So he talks in this one about integrated world modeling theory. It's a synthetic theory of consciousness that uses the free energy principle and active inference framework. And this combines integrated information theory and global neuronal workspace theory. So a lot of theories put kind of stacked on top of one another. So I think it's, if you're interested in that area, that's something for you. We also have a free energy channel here, free energy principle, which hasn't seen as much activity, but you might also want to check that channel out as well. Okay, so that's Cognition Futures, and I think that's it for this week, or, well, this one actually too. I see there are a couple things. So there's this other thing here. Oh, actually, I posted this on Wednesday. This was something I found on, I can't remember what I was looking for, but this was, actually it's from the next paper that I posted. But so this is something that is a timeline from 1960 to, I guess, the present. And this is time, this is what they call other person, which is other as problem, other as interaction, and other as interbeing. I think that refers to how people view other people, like in the field, or how people have dealt with this specific problem. I'm not really sure. You'd have to go into the paper. But then the thing I found interesting for this channel was this cognitive science as. And so then they had this thing, cognitive science is computationalism in 1960, and connectionism a little bit later, then an active embodied cognition in the late 90s, neurophenomenology around the time of Varela, which was 2000, is something that Varela published in 2000. And then 2007, where you have generative neurophenomenology. So it's an interesting, I thought that might be interesting in the context of trajectories. And it's from this paper here, Searching for the Conditions of Genuine Intersubjectivity. This is Tom Froese, who's a person who we met at the workshop recently, at the Emergent Interaction Workshop, and he does a lot of really cool stuff on inaction and things like that. So you might want to check that out as well. Okay, Anusha. Hello, Anusha. How are you? We're just doing the Slack review here.
I'm doing well. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late.
That's fine.
Okay.
Let's see. The CogSci 2021 discussion group. We've been doing some planning here. Let's see, where did we start for this week? It's very hard to keep track of the week sometimes. Like, you see the dates and you're like, okay, this is this Monday. But so yeah, we're gonna have a conversation with Erin Higgs, who is usually at the meetings, but we're gonna have a more in-depth conversation with her about some of the bibliometrics aspects of trajectories. So I think Erin's doing some research on that, and we'll be talking. We couldn't make it this week. We'll do it next week. And so this is, there are a lot of ways you can incorporate the bibliometric approach into this, with just simple literature search, or it could be finding features in the literature like quantifying ideas or citation numbers or topical categorizations. So this is something we want to follow up on. And then this I'm going to talk about this later. This Twitter post by Michael Nielsen, who does a lot of, he's a quantum physicist, but he talks a lot about like the philosophy of science and the science of science. So yeah, this question, kind of curious. I haven't found much written on what a scientific field is. So he's actually good at asking these really sort of basic questions about things like, and this is, I think, a skill. If you want to try to develop it, it would be very useful, I think, to you in the long run. Sitting back and asking questions like this. Just kind of like, you can do it on Twitter, or you can just kind of do it in your own mind. You can just think about like a question and just kind of like go off and do some research on it, or just kind of think about it for a while. And it does really, I think, even if you know the answer, but you want to recast the question and see where it leads you, because apparently Michael asks like the same question or different versions of a question every couple of years. And like, you ask the question maybe today, you do some research on it. Maybe in 3 years you ask the same question, maybe a little bit differently, and you do new research on it, and you suddenly have a new perspective on it. And then it helps you think through some of these ideas, because I think the key to really finding out what you want to find out about something, aside from good research, are questions, asking the right questions. And so he says, I'm sure there's a lot of sociology of science writing on it. Are there good ideas there? What are they? We'll talk about that in a little bit. So keep that in mind, that question. So Jesse says maybe meeting with Anusha for a little bit today. So did that meeting happen?
We weren't able to meet, but I think Jesse and I were going to schedule something for later today.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the schedule is quite chaotic with the East Coast time and the UK time. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a challenge to find a good time when you're like 6 hours apart.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. So yeah, we're kind of, I think in this, this is all I think about the trajectories discussion, but yeah, we're kind of meeting with people offline here to get, or I guess in different meetings to get a little bit deeper conversation going about some of this stuff. So that's good. Please let me know if you're going to meet. I might try to make it, and just so we are more on the same page than otherwise. But yeah, I think this will be nice. This is coming together in terms of the discussion group. I think we're getting some momentum here at least. So we'll see where this goes. Let's see. I think Dev AI had some things here. Yeah, so this is okay. Talked about that. Oh, this is news release from Santa Fe here. Research brief, getting in sync on a budget. And so this is from the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico. This is a complexity group that's been around for many years, of course. and they're talking about synchronization in distributed systems. So this is, if you've ever read the book Sync by Steven Strogatz, that's the popular version of this, where they talk about how, say, fireflies can stay in synchrony. If you watch fireflies coming up from the grass, they have these little luciferase sacs that glow. This is like right around after sunset, and but what they do is they behave in groups, and they synchronize their glowing luciferase sacs, and they are able to synchronize their flashing in different ways. And so it's a lot like social insects, where you have collective structures built around different resources or different communication or whatever. And so this sort of synchronization happens in neurons, though, as well. And this is what this image is. And it actually happens in a lot of systems, from computers to power grids and on. And you can find these broad analogies across systems. And the question is what do they mean? And how do you enable, say, like a synchronization principle in fireflies, and take that and implement it in a power grid, or observe the same thing in the brain? So Steve Strogatz is involved in this. This is a paper published in Nature Communications. They use a temporal network model to show that allowing connection patterns to change over time makes it possible to synchronize a system more efficiently. So this is something that they're doing with, I assume you can think of it as like a neural network, but it's not. It's a temporal network model, so it's like one of these complex networks, and they're just playing around with the connection patterns to see if they can change them over time and induce synchronization. So this is the paper here, Designing Temporal Networks that Synchronize Under Resource Constraints. And they say that the temporal network design is open loop, so it's versatile and expected to work for a wide range of systems. I don't know if they mean open loop by it's accessible to researchers, or if there's it's opposed to closed looped something. I don't really know what that means, but if you're interested, you can read the paper. And then this is the presentation. I'll go over this presentation, but this is our upcoming presentation to the offloading workshop. And this is a developmental model of intelligence offloading, and we'll go through the slides in a little bit. So we have this from Tuesday. We have Jesse posting in epistemological directories. This is something on state-of-the-art AI. So I know Jesse's been working hard on that, and state-of-the-art AI is on Twitter here at this address. And the state-of-the-art, well, I'll let Jesse talk about what state-of-the-art AI is doing, but that's something that people should check out. And I'll let Jesse talk about that after we do the Twitter review here. So, or the Slack review, I'm sorry. Ethics, Society, and Tech. I don't think we had anything new there this week. Let's see. Events, news, nothing really new there. There's something. Yeah, there are a couple things here. So there's this. This is an announcement from Anson and Jesse. This is the Models of Consciousness conference. This is, I think, at Oxford. So this is in September. This is second instantiation of the Models of Consciousness conference. And this, I don't know if this is going to have a virtual component or what, but the topic is what the top title is. So if you're interested in consciousness, we can at least follow up on that. And then this one here is AI Consciousness and Ethics with Dr. Joanna Bryson. And this is, looks like a screenshot from LinkedIn. This is a free lecture on this topic. So this is something, I don't know this is happening July 1st. So I guess this is something you can check out. I don't know where the link is to check it out, but I guess if you go on LinkedIn and go to this page, you can find more information. And so then we have, see, in the general channel, I don't think there's too much. Oh, we do have a couple things in here. So Angela was pointing to Sapient Journals. This is what she talked about last week. This is something she's involved with running. This is, it looks interesting. It's sort of I think it's a biological anthropology journal, but, there are opportunities for people like Anusha to maybe, contribute something on evolution or on maybe something to do with the brain. I don't know so they're accepting submissions here. So I guess they're just going to have this, serial journal that if you're interested in submitting something in this area, and I don't know if you have to be an undergrad to do it, but, that's something that you always try to find out when you try to submit something somewhere. It looks like it's run at Columbia University, so this is, I think, the Columbia University Anthropology Department that's running this, or Ecology, Evolution, and Environmental Biology. So they're, if you want to contact them, here it is. So this is the address, sapientjournal.com. And then Jesse had an announcement about SOTA here, the state-of-the-art AI. So this is the first newsletter he published this week, I think. And so this is a nice way for people to build communities, to build it around a newsletter. I'm doing a newsletter for Rockware community, and it's kind of an art. You have to really kind of you have to build some sort of like rapport with your audience. So you're doing a lot of like, it's, you don't want to be too gimmicky, but you also want to present the latest news in your community, and you want to give people some teasers for things coming up, and you want to provide links that people would be interested in, even if it's not directly related to the thing that you're presenting on, or that's directly relevant to what's happening in your community right now. So I like this one here. They talk about featured paper. They have a featured paper here, which is this paper here on the neurosymbolic concept learner. And they have a citation graph that shows that paper in the context of other things. So that's nice work, Jesse. And then
Thanks. Yeah, I'm kind of walking in the street, so it might be the best to hear me. But yeah, we're doing a little bit more with the newsletter stuff. I don't know if you want to have me to say more about that now, but things are starting to kind of get more rolling with their output from all of that. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's great. So yeah, do you mind talking about it a little bit right now, or? Well, he's probably walking to the...
If you can hear me while I'm moving, I can say things. I don't know if my connection is terrible or not.
You're kind of breaking up, though. Yeah. Why don't you get to a place that's not moving? We'll see if it works better. Yeah, it's that happens. So let's go back to the Slack review, and we'll see what Jesse has to say about that. So let's see if there's anything good in here. I don't know. We talked about a channel for the UK group, where people in the UK, and we might use this Laboratory Meetups channel for this, and this was founded a while back. So we have some capacity here in this channel, and I don't know if people want to just do if they want to use this channel, or if they just want to use the other channels, but you're free to do that if you want, or rename the channel something else. I don't know what would be a better name for it. This is all from, I think, 2 weeks ago. I'm not seeing anything else from this week. So I think we're all caught up. So that's our Slack review. Any questions about that or comments?
I'm currently walking, so I think once I stand still a bit more, I'll be able to say more.
Okay, yeah. How about you, Anusha? Are you have any comments or?
I guess I mean, I can definitely look this up, but for the Columbia Journal, that Angela, she's a reviewer, is that right?
She's on the board, yeah. I think she's
Wow,
probably
okay.
an editor, yeah, or a reviewer.
Okay. Like I've like written manuscripts, but I've never I've submitted them and gotten feedback, but I've never submitted one and gotten published. So like the process is like really intimidating to me.
It is, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like I don't know if this is helpful to share, but I feel I don't know, it's just very intimidating to me. So like if I could have some like, guidance with that, maybe I would have some more confidence like to submit something or write something.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to do, to have in our group. I think definitely a number of people I've worked with in the group here have that same problem, or maybe that's something that they worry about.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, we should definitely try to do some more activities around like how to make that less intimidating.
I would really appreciate that.
Yeah. So the first thing we'd have to do is kind of decide on maybe like something we'd want to submit, and then kind of fix that and say, what do we need to do to get this to the point where we can submit it? And then, that usually involves like going internally and looking at it and, thinking about how it's structured, making sure it's clear to the reader what they're going to see, and then submitting it, and then you get reviews back. And sometimes, the reviews are kind of not helpful, but often they are. And so, we have, I think really there's a strategy to addressing reviews, which is, to kind of, you get the review back and you look at it and you say, how do I do this? How do I work? How do I make this happen so that I can address all of the comments and like kind of, so, usually they require you to have like a little letter where you spell out what you've changed and how you've updated it. And then, the process of actually doing the editing, which is harder because you have to, you have to have a method that you can work through the document and find the places to make changes and make it all fit together again. So, I think definitely, but I think the first step there is to decide on something you want to submit. And then maybe go through that process of like, and this can be done like in Slack or an email where we go through and we look at it and say, what do we need to, does this look good from the standpoint of submitting it? Because sometimes you have things that, they're not quite developed. And so you want to make sure you submit it at the right time. If it's too underdeveloped or, maybe it's just too big for what you want to submit it to. You have to make it really tailored to that audience, and then you can say, okay, this is the right time to submit it.
Okay. Just in general, like it breaks my heart and soul when I put my blood, sweat, and tears into writing, editing a document. I work so hard, and then they reject it or they criticize it. It's like, why? Like I put so much work into this. It's very discouraging for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any help would be greatly appreciated.
Yes. So we can definitely do that. And so it's always a problem. Like you do a lot of work, and it's like, well, you have to, make all these changes, and it's like, oh, sometimes people just like to criticize things, and that's not really helpful. But a lot of times people have good things to say, and it's a matter of just kind of thinking, just not taking it personally sometimes. like if there's something you really like and you have to get rid of it, or it has to change, then that I guess has to change. But I think a large part of it too is like, writing this for different audiences. Like, if you're writing, and I don't know your kind of your experience with working with respect to different fields is, but sometimes you get things where you do a paper that's not really, you might do a paper that's sort of interdisciplinary, and you submit it to a certain journal where they're looking for very traditional submissions in a certain area. So like, I'm just trying to think of an example of a journal, like a very specialized journal in neuroscience. And, you might have something that has a computational element. And so sometimes it's just not suitable for their journal. Yeah. Other times it's going to be a problem where people won't understand what's going on because it's not really, the right audience. Or sometimes you do have to make things, do have to describe things at a different level for certain audiences. Like for a neuro audience, it's not really, they're doing a lot of, say, neuroanatomy or imaging. They won't know a lot of the computational terms. And so then, as opposed to like if you had a journal where you had people who were reading it who were really grounded in computational work, then they would understand the terms and everything much more. It would go down much more easily. But then there are other things that if you present like some sort of, when you start talking about neuroanatomy, then they won't know what you're talking about. So it's always that's kind of balance of, getting in the right audience, figuring out.
Yeah, like really reading your audience and figuring out what are they looking for.
Yeah.
Just to share my past experience, so with writing manuscripts, I've experience in, I guess we could call it like applied linguistics, psycholinguistics. That's where my experience is. I haven't written for like a more biological based journal.
Yeah.
Just an example, just a quick example of a review feedback I got on my applied linguistics paper. We basically found that hearing phrases in your native language is more, you get more of an emotional symptom than the same phrases.
Sure.
How's that? Oh.
Okay. That's a noise.
Oh.
Okay, we basically found that hearing emotional phrases induces a greater skin conductance reaction, and people also perceive it to be more emotional than reading these phrases, which it's kind of intuitive, but it hasn't really been documented. So we found some evidence of that. And so one critique it was very, very good critique. This guy, he's very intelligent, and he said, sometimes there are certain phonemes, and they can, impact like how we perceive things. And so what I did to address that is I made a mini study. I found all the phonemes that induce specific effects, I can't remember right now, but I remember grouping all the phonemes, like fricatives and all of that, that are supposed to convey emotion. And I did like a statistical analysis to see which phonemes had an effect and any correlations between the phrases and the phonemes. And I had to account for what phonemes were in the phrases, and I did a whole thing. I really got into it. That was just like to share my previous experience with you.
That's good. Yeah, it's definitely sometimes. Yeah, if you get like some good constructive reviews, oftentimes you'll get like you'll push the paper forward.
Yeah.
And, it's always good.
No matter how hard they are to read or hear.
Yeah.
Definitely.
definitely. Yeah, so that's good.
Hey, can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. One thing I wanted to say about the papers, and I imagine Bradley kind of made this point, but part of it's just getting used to it and doing it. Because we've had papers that have been, pushed aside and then brought back and turned around and sent to a different audience, and some things that were not the greatest got accepted, and some things that are really good haven't been accepted. So there's not anything to be too particular about. I'm just kind of doing it. So, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
so,
right.
Just kind of keep going with it and getting used to the process of it. And it's really nothing personal. Like, it's not, it's part of academia. It's not like a personal remark about what you did or what you said. There's a lot of different reasons for why things happen, different quotas and all sorts of stuff. So it's really just a matter of, doing it in a lab. That's why the lab is such a great opportunity, because people can come and present, get used to presenting in just weekly meetings, but also we get used to doing it as a group at like actual events and conferences too. So it's good stuff.
Yeah. Thanks, Jesse. So that's good. Well, thank you, Anusha, for that. Set of concerns, conversation. Just I think that's useful for a lot of people in the lab. Yeah.
I guess it is a skill to learn to not get too personally attached to your work, or because it's academia to review, and it like pushes all of us forward. So it's something personal. I get that logically. I just got to get my feelings on par with that. Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that, too, is internal support. We can help, kind of work through some of those things. I mean, when you do it just by yourself, you feel kind of like you're being picked on almost sometimes.
Yeah.
And if other people are saying, well, this is good, it's just, and, you can use, like, the manuscript itself is just one piece of it.
Okay.
You may have other opportunities to talk about what you're doing in, like, blog posts, and, if you do, like, a preprint, there are other opportunities to sort of get the things out. Sometimes things aren't suited for a journal because it's not very well developed or something.
Okay.
So, I mean, there are ways to do, there are ways to communicate some of the other ideas that maybe are something that would make it into a journal. So it's always a, something that's underdeveloped. If it needs to be developed more, that's perfectly okay. Sometimes, you submit to a journal when it's a really high, like a nature journal or something like that, where it's really competitive. So sometimes, you get rejected, and the paper's actually pretty good. So, submitting to something that's lower tier can often, at least in terms of the rankings, can often be like, where it's not suitable for one journal, it may be much more suitable for another journal. So that's something to think about as well.
Okay. And yes, I would appreciate any internal support you guys can offer. That would definitely help.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. And if you're watching on YouTube, if you want to be involved in that, let us know. And you'll feel free to, like, if you have something you want to submit, you can bring it to our attention. If you want people solicit, I often do this with things in the Slack. As you'll see, we'll solicit a review. You put a draft in the Slack channel, and you say, is anyone interested in reviewing this manuscript or presentation? And I mean, occasionally people will want to comment, but it's always something you can ask.
Okay. Just a thought I had, like, on journals and, like, suitability for journals. I wrote a paper for a class on anorexia nervosa. I don't remember it was like a review paper. I think the basic like idea I was just really showing is that with anorexia, the exercise, is rewarding in the brain, of course. And also the food deprivation, there are mechanisms which make that rewarding. And when you combine them, it's like a deadly combination due to evolutionary, which totally makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It was very good for us to continue to be motivated to seek food if there is no food. And when I was looking for, resources, I remember I found this journal. It's like medical theories, and they have like medical theories on all kinds of stuff. Yeah, that was really neat. There's like, it seems like there's almost a journal for everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool. There was some kind of eccentric little theories in there.
Yeah.
I thought it was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just finding the right journal for it, and sometimes that's the answer. But definitely, though, you want to make sure the work is sound, and that's where like internal review can come in handy. People,
Yes.
and the stakes are much less high in internal review because.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, that's great.
Thank you for all of that.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Yeah. So let me see if I can get this submissions document, if we can get squared away on that. I don't think there's too much right now on it. So we do have the, a lot of things on here have been resolved one way or another. We're at 59 here, so we just keep adding to it, and this is from the beginning of the year, so this is our accomplishment for the year here. We have a couple things that are outstanding, so we have this, where is it? We have a couple of things that are going on. There's this Net Open 21, which is happening this week. This is Network Architectures for Growing Academic Open Source. And I don't have it open right now, but this is something I'm doing in collaboration with the Rockwire community. So if you're interested in open source, like community building and that, this is a very good talk with respect to networks and representing those communities as networks. And so there's some stuff in there about the orthogonal lab. I think the event is Wednesday. I don't know if it's being recorded. I might make a version of it for just a recording of the talk if they don't make the recording open. And it's a pretty good talk, so be on the lookout for that. This is a satellite session at Networks 2021, but it's not open to the public. I mean, it's open to people who are attending the conference, but not open to the general public. So, we'll see how that goes. Then we have these EI workshop follow-ups. I submitted an abstract to the Artificial Life special issue and an abstract to the Embodied Intelligence ebook. And so those are things we need to follow up on, I take it. I think these two dates, September 18 and August 31, are important because they represent, and I can't remember what I submitted to the Embodied Intelligence ebook. I'll have to go back and check, but I don't think it's the same abstract. I think it's a different abstract. But, in any case, this is something that there needs to be a paper produced on each of these. And I know that this one for Artificial Life is going to be the embodied continual embodied learning paper that we have, the manuscript. So that just needs to simply be updated. And that'll be due September 18. So like just a rough draft. And then it'll be reviewed. And then maybe in 2022 it'll be published. But we'll see if it gets accepted. And the same thing with the ebook, although they think the ebook is a little bit less, the standards are a little less stringent in terms of like being selective. So, I mean, we don't do like lower quality work for this. It's just a matter of like, what the standards are for the length of the manuscript and the methods that we have to use and all that. I mean, I think this one is going to be more like kind of an overview something, and I can't remember what I had submitted on. It could have been the MetaBrain model stuff, but I'm not sure. In any case, that's been submitted. Then this offloading workshop, which is here. So this is the cognitive offloading workshop, and this one is actually coming up in July. So the 15th, 16th of July, there's this virtual meeting. And it's happening in GMT, which I think is kind of like for North America is like early in the morning to mid-afternoon. For England, it would be in the afternoon to evening. Okay, so they have the times here. So, yeah. So, and then we have our talk that we're going to present on. I don't know if the program's up yet. Oh, they just have their speakers. I think ours is a shorter presentation. They don't have the full program yet. But this is our presentation for this workshop. And so this is going to have to be a 12-minute presentation, give or take. And it's this developmental model of intelligence offloading. This is an image of an alien world that I like, this animated GIF. So this is the idea that there's this agent exploring this weird terrain, and it's building a brain, and it's trying to figure out, based on the organism's state or the agent's state, what kinds of things can be in the environment can be used to sort of scaffold an intelligent behavior, and what needs to be left as a representation in the brain. So the idea is there's this developing nervous system this is a fish brain, by the way. This is a 3-lobed fish brain. I might change this picture to something like a embryonic brain if I can find one, but the idea is that the brain will grow in size based on the degree of offloading that one can have, and then you explore this environment, and you might use things in the environment like rocks as affordances, or there might be some built environment which isn't shown here that you might use to as a way to scaffold intelligence outside of the brain. So that's sort of the idea, and this is the abstract. I always put the abstract in here when we're building the slides so that we don't stray too far from it. And then each part is sort of represented in these slides. So we're going to have a little bit on something called developmental systems theory, a little bit on the zone of proximal development, which is a thing that I don't think we mentioned in the abstract, but is going to be we're going to have a slide on that. We have these developmental trade-offs. So there's a trade-off between sort of the energy budget of the organism or the agent and the actual brain size. So when the energy budget is limited, the brain can't grow to a large size. So that increases pressure for these affordances. So there's a brain size and internal representation pressure. So sometimes there's a pressure to grow a big brain to keep all the intelligence in the brain as opposed to the environment. Then there's direct perception and affordances. So in cases where you have a very rich environment, or you have affordances where things can be used as affordances, you have that pressure. And then you have stigmergy, which is where you have a bunch of agents that build collective structures or engage in collective behaviors, like fireflies synchronizing their flashing, or like social insects that build nests and trail systems that they can use to store information in the environment. So those are all different pressures that drive this process during development of trading off. And so then we talk about why internal representations, do a little bit of review on some of this idea that sociality plays a role in driving brain size and intelligence, and maybe using the external environment to boost that. So there are a number of resources on that. Then we'll have a practical example. Right now I'm putting spatial cognition as a placeholder, but we might use another example or a secondary example. And then that's all we have right now. And this needs to be done by the 5th of July. So I'm going to be working on it, and I hope I put a link to this talk in the chat. So Angela, and Jesse are authors on it. So if you guys can contribute some comments, or how we might improve the talk, we have again the abstract. So if you go through the abstract and you notice that we don't have something there, and I think we need to define some of these terms too in this part of the abstract. I know that this was a question Angela had, and I know I missed that in the first pass here, but we'll put that in there. So
could I have a link to this this presentation as well? Like I've heard of like the zone of proximal development. I need to refresh my memory, but like maybe I could help with like some editing or something.
Yeah, that'd be great. Let me get the link. I'll put it in the chat, and then you can take a look, leave comments like I just did.
Okay.
So yeah, this is just like we're trying to go through some of these ideas and then build a model of developmental offloading. So the idea is the agent is developing a brain, but the brain is, going to be maybe a subset of what is going to be later be intelligent behavior. So you can have the brain producing behavior, you can have things in the environment that facilitate intelligent behavior, or you can have these things in the social environment that stimulate it. So that's basically the idea. And then some of these ideas would fit into that. And these slides will be like kind of presaging the idea, but then later we might want to tie some of this back in to these original ideas. And these are ideas, developmental systems theory and zone of proximal development, that are very common, or they're older ideas, they're classic ideas, and so we want to pull those together into this. So yeah, definitely that would be good. So other than that, we do have coming up, I think there are always these NeuroSim workshops that are being proposed, so we'll be on the lookout for those. I haven't seen any interesting ones yet. And then we have the Neuromatch Academy, of course, which is coming up much sooner. And so this is something that is sneaking up on us. I think it starts in 2 weeks. And I just got some information about being a mentor for this. So this is something that if you're involved in Neuromatch Academy, either the neuro one in July or the deep learning one in August, it's definitely something that you will be busy with, and we'll definitely be talking about in the meetings. If that's something that you want to be involved with, but not maybe actually doing the academy itself, we'll be talking about it in the meetings, and we'll probably be talking about it in the Slack channel. So this will be a good opportunity for people to engage with this material, engage with the academy, and think about these issues. Last year we had a lot of focus around sort of the Neuromatch Academy and sort of learning new concepts. So we had done a very aggressive push amongst the people interested in Neuromatch Academy to get them sort of into the lab a little bit and give them a taste of what we were doing, and then covering a lot of topics maybe that they didn't talk about so much in the lectures that might be interesting, things like information theory and some more like a different view in Bayesian modeling, a more conceptual view. So there are a lot of things we did that were sort of supplementary or sort of off to the side of what NMA was doing. And I think a lot of people enjoyed that. And that was, of course, last year when everyone was locked down. This year, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of interest in, being, I know they have a formal prep session, for example, this time. But it's definitely something to sort of, as the academy gets rolling, we'll be doing more things regarding this. So, okay, so that's NMA, and I don't really have anything on the, I should put a deadline here of like, I think the Neuro one starts July 5th, And then the deep learning one starts like August 5th, let's just say. And so that's coming up just to make sure that we stay within the sort of the correct time scale there. So it reminds me, I was thinking about NMA this week, and I was thinking about this this isn't the right one. This is it. Okay, so this is one of the websites that we have for the lab. This is a group called Representational Brains and Phenotypes, and technically Saturday Morning NeuroSim is under that category. So we have the main website, and then we have this website, which has some specialized things about projects. But this is one of the pages. This is about so last year we did a NeuroMatch Academy discussion group. So this was something that we started as a pre-course, but they have a formal pre-course now. So I wanted to transition this website from what this is now, which is the pre-course, to sort of this idea that you can have these, we have these resources that were built. I don't think, they're in here. I have to update this list. But it's a mix of like tutorials and lectures that I made last year. So I'm going to have to update this list and maybe structure it so that people can get the most out of this. Because right now it's not very well structured for this year's potential activities. What I'm talking about specifically is that I created a bunch of lectures in the course of last year during the academy that were sort of on different topics. So there was one on information theory. There was one on aging and life history, which Anusha might be really interested in. There's one on Bayesian, conceptual Bayes or whatever, conceptual Bayesian thinking. So there's a lot of stuff that they didn't really approach it in the same way in the academy. So those might be very useful to people, but I need a way to advertise it better. And so I'm going to go through this website or this web page, and I'm going to restructure it to reflect that. I think that'll be useful when people come into the academy. I'm going to be mentoring a group or two, so those people will have access to it, and they might be in our group here. So it'll be useful to revisit this and kind of go through these resources. I don't know if I'm going to update them this year. I might present a couple of them again, but I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on them this year as I did last year. But that's coming up this next month. And so then we also have the not only the NeuroMatch Academy, but our discussion group on trajectories. So that's also coming up. Jesse, did you have anything to report on that front?
What's that?
On the trajectories discussion group.
I kind of missed what you were saying before that, but could you give me a brief recap of what was just said a few moments ago?
Oh, about the NeuroMatch Academy?
Well, I thought you were talking about the NeuroMatch Academy, and then are we transitioning topics, or like I don't?
Yeah.
I didn't quite get the.
Yeah, we're transitioning topics. Unless you had something to say about NeuroMatch Academy,
Not particularly. What I would say for that is mostly there's still a big call for mentors. Like if anybody knows a mentor, I think Bradley's doing that again, and I appreciate that. But if there's still if you know anybody at all, please put them in touch with me or them. If you don't know how to get in touch with them, you can reach out to me. But that's all I have to say about NeuroMatch Academy. I'm only going to be doing the deep learning one, if at all. I really do want to do it, but my August is kind of busy. One thing I also wanted to say, kind of adjacent to this, is I know we're talking about a data and privacy event, and I don't know if that might be better to do maybe in August instead of July. But that's a separate topic. But I don't know if we had any thoughts about that, or if I missed that talk earlier.
Oh, you mean about the event, data and privacy?
Yeah.
That's probably going to happen in the early fall. So that probably won't even be in August. It'll be maybe September.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Outside of that, I would say, as far as the cognition trajectory stuff, yeah, I'm gonna try to meet with Anusha later today or tomorrow. I'm gonna try to give her a special project of like specific things about developmental stuff, maybe child developmental stuff. I know it's kind of one of her things or spoke at stuff. As far as Erin goes, I think she had a technical setback, and she's not even here today. So she usually comes to the meetings, so that's kind of too bad. But she'll be available, and I was talking to her a few different times the last week or so about basically. I'm not sure if she wants to do a pure bibliometrics approach or not, because I kind of want to let her loose on it, and if she comes up with a better strategy, let her do it, because I think she wants to have some ownership and wants to do some data analysis. And I'm like, sure, if you can find some publication data analysis that fits trends, like publication trends, that she likes and that she approves of, then go for it. I know she can be kind of a critical stickler about how data is brought about. So I kind of just want to say, all right, go find this, and if she finds good stuff, then that's great. We can go with that. That's kind of my idea with her. And when we do meet with her, Bradley, it might be good to maybe go over some ways of doing that, or like, I know there's the what happened to cognitive science, which is a bibliometric approach of its own, and maybe we can, triangulate something from that and go from there. But that's what I had in mind about that. If you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it would be a good opportunity to go over some of the ideas that, some of the things that people have done, or, what would be the best way to approach this.
Okay.
Yeah. So there are different methods, and I think I listed a couple, but I didn't really get into them too much. And I know Erin's she said she was looking at methods as well. So, like, these are things that, we just, we want to employ methods that are, like, reasonable for looking at this. But, yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Whenever.
So.
Okay. Also, do you want to say hi? Say hi. Do you?
Hello?
Anson is here, and he says hi. He may not be able to talk right now, but I'm going to later this evening when I go to more in-depth talk with him about the event itself, and kind of, get his input in. I would love it if kind of like Anusha and Erin and Anson all kind of had their own little projects sort of for it. So that way they could have some ownership about it, but we'll see how that goes. Also, I'm not sure, like, I haven't heard that much from Shruti, and I heard a little bit from Rashad and a little bit from Christian, but I don't know if they want to be doing. I haven't really heard from them specifically about stuff, so, that's kind of what's up with that. And Angela, maybe, she's interested, and she's kind of doing the cognitive offloading stuff, so we'll see from that. But that's kind of my general update for now.
Okay. That's good. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we'll be kind of going along with this trajectories group thing. That's coming along, I think. We'll just have to keep on it and make sure that we get things sorted out. I think, I think it's good to give people ownership of different things, so we can at least, have a nice collection of things that people do, a diversity of things. It's kind of like what was done for the Women in Computing session, where we had different people contributing. So, yeah. And so, I guess they would, each person would have a short presentation or during the event. I guess, yeah.
I'm sorry, there was a bit of a cut out there. Could you say that again?
So people would be each person would do a short presentation during the event. Is that what you're envisioning?
Or,
Yeah, probably. I mean, it would make sense to me doing it that way. And then, we'd have, I mean, it wouldn't be a really long thing, but like.
sorry, there was a bit of an issue here with that.
Oh.
You were asking about presentations?
Yeah, I mean, for each person, would they give a short presentation, or how would they present their findings to the workshop or the group that we're having?
They might. I'm not sure. It really will depend on how much they want to get involved with this, because I don't know if they want to, or if, some people may not be comfortable presenting fully. But I mean, it would be great if Erin could present her data and all that stuff, and to what extent Anusha wants to do stuff, I don't know. But that's. I think there can be opportunities for that for sure.
Okay. Yeah, we might think a little bit about how we would present it, so people can present maybe, and then we could also summarize some of it, so people.
Yeah, I also see it like blending in between different amounts of like some generic discussions, some informative things, some like debates or panels, and then interspersing that with some specific presentations by people about again, it will kind of. It's a bit up to. I don't feel like I can just say, oh well, I know Aaron's going to do this and Chris's going to do that. So it's kind of like up for you guys to say what you want to do and how much, whether or not you want to be visibly presenting stuff or not. So I'm kind of waiting on them to confirm that.
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, we'll get it like more organized. Up there, Jesse fell off line, but yeah, we'll get it more organized as we go along here. So, yeah, so we have a couple weeks on that still. It's coming up, of course, at the end of July, but I think people can, and we don't want to, spend. Like, we don't have an infinite time to get the event organized, so we have to do this within the next few weeks. But I think we can get something to present, and then, people can continue on with the stuff afterwards. That's also the idea, is that we want to be able to facilitate some sort of sustainability in the project and move forward on it. We don't just want to have this one-time thing and then forget about it. That's often what happens with a lot of these workshops and discussion groups. So that's good for that. I don't know what happened. Jesse lost his connection. So I'm going to just move ahead, and I'm going to continue on with some things I wanted to talk about here. Oh, there's Jesse. He's back. Okay. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Jesse.
Yeah, you're having trouble with your connection, but...
Yeah.
What?
You're having trouble with your connection, yeah. Well, anyways, yeah, so let's continue here. So yeah, the cognitive, or the Cognition Futures page, this is the one that, this is our website here. We have, so we're kind of, this is the old discussion group one. So this is our interim website here. It's on Notion. We have, this is going to be, I guess, an introduction to the discussion group for people, so that they can get a sense of the project as it stands, where it's been. So, yeah, I think that's pretty decent right now. We have critical periods, CogSci discussion notes, so we're kind of getting some of this fleshed out. That's good. And I think, like, I don't know how we're going to have access to everyone who's going to be involved in this. So we'll have our own group, but we'll probably have other people off, from the CogSci conference. So I'm not really sure how we're going to route them into some of these materials, but maybe, at the beginning of the session, we'll have we can give them some introductory materials, which would be good to sort of orient them. So that's good. And it looks like, we're coming along on this website part, so that's good. Let's just keep talking about that in the next couple weeks. So I think that's all I wanted to talk about there. And then so now let's get into some of these papers and pieces of discussion here. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was this. This goes back to this Michael Nielsen tweet that I mentioned in the Slack review. And so I think this is the original. Yeah, okay. So this is the original tweet, or the question that he asked. Kind of curious. I haven't found much written on what a scientific field is. So it's like, we talk about scientific fields, but what are they as units of sort of human activity or engagement, or what is it exactly? So there's a lot of sociology of science. He's proposing that there is, and we'll see in a minute that there actually is a decent amount. Are there good ideas there? What are they? So keep that in mind as we go through this stuff. So I kind of went through this stuff last night, and I was like kind of putting together some things here. So he did, one thing he talks about in the thread here is that he uses this term field finding or field founding. And I think we've talked about this in past meetings where, like, you're talking about like a field that gets founded by some person or a group of people, they're interested in a topic, and they say, there's this issue that we need to solve, and they start publishing papers, and they give you this, there's the literature that emerges, and sometimes there's a formal name to the field, sometimes there's not, but there's a field nonetheless. And so this is the field founding Google Scholar search. You get some interesting topics here. A lot of them are sort of very deeply topical, so they might be reviews of like different fields. Like this one is The Evolution of Strategic HRM. It's themed through two founding books, a 30th anniversary perspective on the development of the field. So this is where you have a specific sort of topic where, there was some founding book or paper that kind of laid out the vision for it. And so once you have that, then, it's sort of a formal call for that field to emerge. Sometimes it's just people trying to solve a problem and saying, here's a paper on, some topic, here's another topic, and they kind of come together as this, if you search a term 20 years hence, you find those papers as sort of the root of a bunch of things that have been cited. So you can see that there are things that in Google Scholar, you can actually do something called a forward search. I can't get the zoom. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. Let me zoom in on this. Okay, so you can see this here where you have citations. You search for something, you get these hits back, and then you see this thing, it says cited by. So it's like cited by 23. Well, in a actual Scholar search, you click on that hyperlink, and it gives you all the papers that cited this paper. So, there's these papers are actually like summaries of the field. So they're not really what we're interested in. But what we're talking about with respect to that is you would have like one of these field founding papers, right? Like a good example is if you go back to Richard Feynman, and he published a paper in 1959 called, I think something like There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom. And it was basically a field founding paper on nanotechnology or nanoscience, the idea that you can build things at the nanoscale. And so that was not really a highly technical paper, but it was a sort of call for people to go in this direction. And so that paper then is cited by a lot of people because they use that as the inspiration for future work. And then so papers like this actually give us a good idea of what that looks like. As the fields form more organically, this is the, sort of the summary of it. So in this case, they're talking about a novel field of research, bioorganic metallic chemistry, origins and founding principles. So this is a retrospective, but it kind of lays out what the field is, that's emerging. People were calling it, they were using this term, and they were using it kind of gradually, and you end up with this field. So one way you can get a field, or what a scientific field is it's a sort of emergent set of papers that, maybe someone lays a vision out, or more commonly, they just kind of start publishing stuff interesting, if they're interested in a certain topic, and then you start to get a literature that emerges in that topical area. So the stuff we're doing with critical periods is actually interesting in that respect, because, you think about, well, where is the critical period field start? And it's not really that easy to figure out. There isn't like a founding paper, and if you found one, correct me, please. But there isn't necessarily a founding paper, but there are these papers by people like Takao Hensch and, other people. Even you can go back as far as like Piaget, where they talk about these ideas. And so you can follow this trend where you have like papers that do different, ask different questions and, address the answer, address it differently. And they may or may not cite each other, but you can actually map out this field from those references. And so, it would be interesting to see like, what that looks like as a network. And of course, that's what, trajectories is kind of about, is like mapping out some of those networks of resources. So this is the bibliometric approach. This is one way it could be done. But there are other things we need to think about. So we think about like, scientific fields as sort of these citation networks or citation trajectories, and that's great, but there are actually other things we can talk about with respect to a scientific field. Maybe it's more sociological, maybe it's more looking at the players in the field and, how you get a field that comes together, how you get people writing these papers in the first place. And so, you have these sociologies of philosophies. So this is where we have field finding coming from individual histories. So this is where we get into the sort of the hardcore sociology of it, where we have these different ideas and how fields emerge as sociological entities. Okay, is that Jesse coming back online?
Yeah, it's
okay.
Me. I'm finally embedded back in a normal situation. So.
Okay, yeah. So, all right, let me go back. All right, so this is where we get into sort of the sociology of field finding, and this is what was in some of the things that were listed in this thread as well. People were responding with things about the sociologies of philosophies, and Pierre Bourdieu, who is a social theorist, a French social theorist, had a lot of ideas. One of his ideas was he had an approach to field formation that was based on what they call sociological field theory. And so this is the Wikipedia page for this idea. This is a broader idea than academic fields, but it's pretty relevant to what, to answering the question here. And Pierre Bourdieu had a specific view on this. There's another person called Laudon who had this idea of research traditions. So this is from theories to research traditions. This is a paper. So the idea is that there are these traditions, and this actually goes, this is broader than scientific fields or academic fields. This goes back to research traditions build on different traditions, like religious traditions or cultural traditions, and how they sort of contribute to things as the development of intellectual life. So, for example, you have traditions that, lead to other things later on, and, your theories maybe about the world are embedded in these cultural traditions, One of those, of course, are the research traditions, but there are others as well. So there's this paper, Tradition Constituted Inquiry and the Problem of Tradition Inherence. And I don't know exactly what that is. Let's see. Yeah, inherence. So this is pretty deep into like some of these ideas, but in this paper I critique McIntyre's theory of rationality of traditions. I argue that McIntyre's attempt to recover a strong conception of tradition-constituted inquiry leaves him in a bind. And so this is kind of a critique of this approach. So, there are a bunch of things over here that, kind of fit in, like the rationality of traditions and this is, pretty deep philosophy here, but...
this is like, I think you did this on purpose, right? But that's the McIntyre we talked about before.
I didn't do it on purpose, but I mean, it may be.
Yeah, that's actually, that McIntyre, if you go back to the paper, please.
Okay.
Yeah, McIntyre, Alasdair McIntyre, he's the person who kind of set off the whole ethics team from happening because of, essentially because of Valeria's bringing him up a long time ago. And I understand that this is a critique of his stuff, but he was a really interesting figure who's critiquing a lot of, not critiquing, but like kind of trying to find the basis for some moral, ethical, trying to create a methodology or even a theoretical or philosophical take on how to, evaluate even some ethical, like, general paradigms. So it's quite interesting to see him come up here in this way, even as a critique of his potential work.
Yeah, now I should have said that it was on purpose, because that would have been more impressive, right? Wouldn't have been ethical, but... But I noticed when I was putting this together that there was a tie into ethics, and like it was feeding back into the ethics. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of that sort of movement in between. People do things like you'll find that like, oh yeah, there's that person. They're doing this interesting thing. There's another interesting thing. So it's always fun to find those connections. And then there's this. So there's a sociological view. There's a sort of philosophical view, and then there's this historicist view. In this case, it's the historicist theories of scientific rationality, this is a link to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. And this talks about many people have regarded science as the one human enterprise that successfully escapes the contingencies of history to establish eternal truths about the universe by a special rational method of inquiry. Historicists oppose this view. So this fits back into this idea of these research traditions where you have things going on in the past and they sort of color your theories into the future. And you can think about like things like, Darwinian evolution on the one hand was novel in terms of mechanism, but on the other hand was the product of a lot of the natural history that can come before it. And so there's that idea of a sort of contingency. And so they kind of, again, get deep into some philosophy here, but so they actually bring up Kuhn and Lakatos, Feyerabend, Laudon. Here's Larry Laudon. And this is called the Battle of the Big Systems. So the Battle of the Big Systems of the 60s and the 70s involved these Kuhn and Lakatos. They were all historicists. So this eventually gave way to a realist reaction, as many philosophers rejected the perceived skepticism and potential relativism of the historicist movement, now reinforced by new wave sociology of science. The 1990s featured the so-called science wars, as philosophers attempted to defend truth, rationality, objectivity, and scientific progress in their own turf from the perceived threats of rapidly developing sociology-inspired science and technology studies and other postmodern influences. Since then, a group of interdisciplinary scholars have attempted to reimagine ways in which historical and philosophical work can be brought together fruitfully. So this is like, this again, it does have a lot of ties to the philosophy of science and ethics, because, ethics is a field of philosophy, of course. And so there's this paper here, Specialties. Not sure what that means, but this is the paper here, I think. The Conceptualization of Scientific Specialties. Okay. This is Daryl Chubin. This is from the Sociological Quarterly. And this kind of gives us, this talks about the phenomena of research specialization in science, where you talk about specialties, and then those specialties become the fields that we talk about. So, in the second section, a theoretical perspective on the development of specialties is formulated. This perspective incorporates demographic factors into the study of specialty structures and processes, and suggests in particular that core researchers derive innovations from the margins of their specialty. Maintenance and realignment of social structures depends on the intellectual events that occur in the course of normal scientific progress. The notions of intellectual migration as a career research style, the prevalence of transient specialties lacking institutionalized bases are explored and recommended. So this is really, has a lot to do with sort of the dynamics of fields and how they evolve over time. So that's research specialties. There are epistemic cultures, which are Karen Noor Satina, and this was something that I found on, it was actually a Twitter post that I didn't put in here, but someone asked what people think of in terms of AI, like what is artificial intelligence, and it was a survey like with different answers, and it was like there was no consensus. People thought of it alternatively as a paradigm, a membership, and a literature. So a paradigm meaning like a set of ideas, a membership meaning like people belonging to the field. You're an AI researcher, you're not, whatever the criterion is for membership. And then as a literature, so you think about it just purely as a literature that you read. This is AI or it isn't. And so that's how people, there was no consensus on what AI meant as a field. It was just kind of like, I think paradigm was a little bit more popular, but I don't know if I had that in here. No, that's that one. Field founding. No, it's not. So yeah, I don't have it in here, but it's, yeah. So anyways, it was this pluralistic view of what it is, and so it's probably all of these, but it's, it's worth thinking about that, sort of those different definitions. And then, you get in back to Pierre Bourdieu's ideas, his view of fields, and he talked about sociological field theory. That was his approach, but he thought of it a little bit, a little bit differently. He used sociological field theory, for example, to view fields as areas of production. So this is sort of like an idea of where people are producing work, academic work, in different areas. They're structured spaces, so fields include things like organizations, markets, individuals, and groups. So when he says fields, and there's a lot of freedom in what he says, because he would write in this really dense language, and it was translated from French. So if you read Bourdieu, it's very fertile. But I think the idea here is that he's talking about fields more generally than academic fields, but you can take a lot of these and plug them into academic fields, and they work fairly well. Fields are separate from all of these things. Though the fields include organizations, markets, individuals, and groups, fields are actually separate from them. They're their own entity, but they include these. So we're really no closer to a definition of what a field is in that way. But I think if you take it with, say, for example, this view of AI, this sort of pluralistic thing, I think you can get a sense of what it is. This epistemic cultures idea is also a very interesting idea, and I don't know if I brought a paper to show on this. I think this one here, no, that's not it. This is it. So this is Karen Orsatina's work, From Pipes to Scopes, the Flow Architecture of Financial Markets. It's a paper on financial markets, but it gives kind of an idea of an example of some of these ideas. And so she talks about markets here, but like, I think there's some ideas in here about some of the epistemic cultures. So you can think about what those words mean. Epistemic meaning knowledge, and knowledge cultures. So, you think about knowledge as a culture, right? It's like you get enculturated into like neuroscience or AI. You have to learn phrases and terms. You meet people, and kind of who people are in the field. You know what the terms are, but also the papers to read. You know the history. So there's a lot of cultural sort of knowledge there that you need to have. So that's one of the reasons why people get PhDs, is to learn that. But it's very important in terms of defining a field as well. So yeah, okay, so that's down here. Karen Orsatina published 2 books, The Manufacture of Knowledge and Epistemic Cultures. And so that's the paper that I just showed you. There's this Chubin paper, Conceptualization of Scientific Specialties, which we talked about. And then field theory actually itself can be broken down in a couple ways. There's Kurt Lewin, who's done a psychological approach to this. There's Bourdieu, of course, who did a social stratification approach. So again, with respect to, production and markets and organizations. And then Paul DiMaggio and Walter Powell, who take an institutionalist view, viewing fields as an institution, which means that it has its own like sort of set of structures and inertia and all that. So that's my recap of that. I did that last night. I was putting this together, just kind of like doing a deep dive into this. So I don't know if this is something that's really relevant. Well, it's of course relevant to trajectories, but I don't really know how much it's relevant. So, do we have any comments on that?
No comments, but I really appreciate this. I'm going to have to go back and watch everything from the start, because I think this is a really, really good overview that you're doing here. I appreciate it a lot. And I'm going to encourage Aaron and others to look at it who are here today, right now. But this is good.
Yeah. All right. I'll just make some notes here. Yeah, and something that, like, I don't know. Like, again, like I said, you have to ask the right questions to get the answer. So this is motivated by someone's question. And, if you didn't ask the question, you wouldn't get the answer that you... but that's... So, I mean, my take on it is that I think one of the things, and we see this with the critical period stuff, one of the things that's, I think, underappreciated is the whole notion of what an academic field or a scientific field is. It's like, we do a lot of, like, citation patterns and thinking about the papers in the field. We don't think about the idea that, our field is like, or whatever. Well, we don't have a field here, but if you're an AI or you're attending an AI conference, that there's a whole culture around that, what's going on at the conference, like what gets covered and what people are talking about, what the major questions are people are asking. So, there's this history, this sociology of science thing where, like, they'd have sociologists going into science labs and studying the science lab itself, and then some of the scientists, hardcore scientists, think that's irritating, but it does yield a lot of insight from the perspective of what, how you're actually doing, the field's evolving, and it's sort of a self-awareness that you can, and of course this hooks into ethics, because there's an ethics of like what are we actually talking about. It's easy to be taken in by your own questions. Like at the same time, it's important to ask questions, and the right questions. You also get, like in AI, you get, people kind of get into these kind of holes where they kind of they get self-referential, and they kind of think about problems from a very narrow perspective, and so.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of an impossible dream, or I don't think it's really a fool's errand, but I feel like a lot of things with cognition futures and and the trajectory, the general sense of the mapping stuff, is sort of like it's not the same. Well, I mean, even just making a generic map of the landscape is kind of, what level of detail do you want to have, and that's its own choice, and you have different amounts of detail for different models and how much they serve a purpose, and that's a whole discussion about modeling and stuff like that. But there's a sort of humility that has to come with the process of trying to do it, and this is actually kind of relates to a discussion that Erin and I had about this earlier, which is like she's very concerned about wanting to have an accurate, when we're doing a data analysis on the field. It's like she was kind of against using specific keywords, because keywords are limited, and I feel like yes, like I wish I could have a perfect methodology that would have no error, no bias, or no no way of being tipped. But I feel a bit more like, and I wish I was here for the full presentation so I could kind of relate what you said to this. So forgive me if I'm kind of I may be not really playing off of the riff that you were setting with what you said earlier, but in a lot of ways, I think one of the most humble and realistic things you can do is simply say, here are the competing narratives, as opposed to here's the answer. Here's sort of a triangulation plus of lenses. Here's a set of lenses that you can use, and depending on what you're looking at, and because you could probably make an argument even for like cognitive science in general. You could make arguments for. There's sort of like, you have some very concrete things, like some elements of bibliometrics are concrete, and like what journals are doing more, what are keywords. Those are concrete things, even if they are not substantial or like inherently valued in the right way. And also like funding, like what is the funding or the rate of growth of linguistics programs. I've mentioned that a few times, and it's like, well, linguistics programs that I've been a part of or been around have been, definitely not as big as they used to have been in some cases. And there are reasons for why that's happened, in different winters and summers of different connections to big funding ideas and all that stuff. But it's like, outside of these pillars of objective, empirical things, in quotes, it's kind of like, especially because, one of my professors a long time ago, he was a political science guy, he said the hardest time to understand is the one that you're currently in. And I think that's true, but also that's also just like, I kind of, it's this sort of a sense of like, hindsight is 20/20, but also I think hindsight is 20/20, especially in this context, is almost a misleading thing to say, because after everything has happened, there's no possibility space. You're just looking at what actually happened. And right now, like we're looking at in this case, we're tasked with, or that's the idea behind the whole program, is sort of like, what are trajectories, and where are they going? Where could they go? And it's not really, it really isn't a science to it. It's kind of a predictive art form or forecasting in some ways. As you can see, we can look at, I feel like there's going to be part of things we're looking at what has happened and then what is like currently trending. And then it's like, well, ideally, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this, but like ideally I would love to have all of those things in some elements and then a sense of trying to offer a little bit of what are the, what are the obvious narratives and trajectories that we have, and what are sort of the things that are on the fringe that are maybe not being looked at, or, I would love to be able to say with some authority, and I don't think I can, but I'd love to be able to say with some authority, here are some things that aren't looked at, here's why it would be good to look at them, but here also is why, here are the factors for why they aren't being looked at, like I feel like this is an easier conversation to have just because I'm actually surprisingly more versed in it for like the machine learning, deep learning stuff. But like I think about Gary Marcus's critique of deep learning, and well, there's a lot of funding in big data, and Facebook and Amazon and the powers that be, so to say, are heavily heavily incentivized to be using big data and about these giant models that rely on them, and I'm not trying to be overly political, but like those are reasons, why stuff happens. And in cognitive science, there are definite funding anchors and barriers that affect things too, and there are people pushing against them, like And there's also like novel and exciting ways. Like this is kind of why I mentioned like the AR stuff and some of the extended reality kind of things as a means to do this. Because like I think there are there are a lot of direct paths to things and there are a lot of indirect paths to things, and those are all fun and exciting and big question marks. For being able to study the questions that the cognitive scientists might be trying to understand. So that's a bit of a freestyle response to everything, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Anusha, did you have any comments?
No comments.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. So yeah, that's a good discussion. So that was the fields and discovery thing. I went through that. We also had this small thing on mapping culture, which is kind of related. So this goes back to the CGS presentation, and in this presentation, we're talking about kind of like at the beginning. There's this couple slides where we talk about kind of like how to map categories of beliefs or maybe binary oppositions. So this is like in politics when people talk about left versus right. This is actually a spatial term because it refers, and this is an example of the EU Parliament, but it exists in most political bodies where people of different ideological orientations sit on different ends of the room or of the space, and so you can actually map that out in space. And then, but that's something like this is based on sort of a Gaussian model of ideology. So, you have things on the left, things on the right, things in the center, and then there's this distribution here. It kind of maps sort of subjectively to a distribution. And then you end up with, you can have this sort of visualization, or you can have this type of visualization. And this is called the World Cultural Map, where you have a map of where they did this survey of values across cultures, and they would have like different components, and then they would map it out onto a space, and then they would try to classify different countries and different cultures. And so this again is spatial because you have different regions of the world fall into these different cultural categories. But sometimes they're not spatially contiguous, but even the representation is in a space, and that helps people understand it. So there's this idea of there's this connection between sort of ideological spaces and space, like spatial relations, that is sort of underappreciated. But then there's this other article by Ted Underwood and Richard Jean So talks about, can we map culture? So this, I think this is a nice, and this is from the Journal of Cultural Analytics. So
are you sharing your screen?
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, let me share my screen. So, yeah, I forgot to share my screen again. Okay, so yeah, let me go back over these slides just to show you the slides of what I was talking about. So, again, going back to this talk, you have this basic left-right orientation in politics, which is mapped onto a space. You have these maps of cultural maps where they take components of data and they map it into a space, a bivariate space, and then they try to define culture. Some of these are spatially contiguous, but some are not in terms of on the surface of a globe, but these have their own sort of spatial definition. So that's the idea. And then we go into this paper, Can We Map Culture? And so this is a paper on sort of talking about the utility of mapping, like, if you use these cultural analytics methods. And this, I think they talk in this one about like social media, mapping, taking cultural phenomena, mapping it to a physical space. And so in this case, you're talking about mapping it to a physical space using numbers or just kind of a sort of a quantitative framework to take these ideas and put them in a spatial representation, and then deriving things like distances. So we do some of this in the CGS approach, but then this actually asks the question, but do cultural relationships really behave like physical distances? In other words, like if you look back at that map of world cultures and their temperament, you have, sometimes you have countries that are nearby, cluster in the same culture, but sometimes they're countries that are halfway around the world. So, that's a good sort of argument for and against this idea of cultural relationships behaving like physical distance. We have good reasons to think the analogy is imperfect, and a number of alternative geometries have been proposed, extending in a few cases to a systematic distinction between the mathematics of embodied experience and epistemic experience, which is this idea from Chang and Tadeo, which is actually more about knowledge experiences. So we test several proposed alternatives to spatial metrics against ground truth implicit in human behavior. And so sometimes it's possible to improve on distance metrics, but we don't yet find evidence that the information theoretical measures recommended as appropriate for epistemic questions are generally preferable to these spatial maps. So this is so one popular way to visualize cultural categories is to convert them into a physical space. So this is a comic by Randall Munroe, who does XKCD, and this is a map of, I think, of social media where you have AIM, Twitter, Trollbase, Sea of Memes, just kind of the idea that you're putting these concepts into a map, or like a physical map, where you have things that have a defined geography or a defined space, and these features are all kind of related to one another in that space. So that's the idea. And then, so fanciful maps of culture also competing with visualizations that make a more serious claim to represent culture spatially. So those kind of maps are interesting, but they're not rigorous. But we do have visualizations that are more rigorous, but they do fall into that same category of like trying to build a map and trying to extend that metaphor. So in this case, we have, this is a dimensionality reduction of these different genres. So they have novel in title, play in title, poetry or poems in title. This is work in some literature on, I don't exactly know what, but they're ways to define genres, and they're basically taking the data and they're mining and they're trying to, using dimensionality reduction to find these. So they're taking like a bunch of different dimensions of some set of texts, and they're defining it into a two-dimensional space. So they're reducing the dimensionality, and then they're able to use different features of the data points that are in common here in these clusters to define them. So this is novel, something with novel in the title. This is defining this cluster. Something at play in the title is defining this cluster, and so on. Now, as you can imagine, that makes for a nice, neat map, but it doesn't necessarily tell you a lot about what, they might have like one thing in common, but there's a lot of heterogeneity underlying this map. So, in short, quantitative approaches to culture rely heavily on the conceit that cultural artifacts are positioned in a field analogous to a physical space. And so this is something that's a digital humanities question that they're asking. So this is something that maybe we haven't thought about before, but is a question that they've been asking in that field. This goes back to 2011 and the suggestion that humanists need to replace the realist models of knowledge implied by standard maps with a non-standard map that expresses the constructiveness of space. So, okay, so let me see if there's, I want to go a little bit farther out here. So this is one example of distance. Our basic intuition about space is that points are related by a function we call distance. Distance can be measured in several ways. As a straight line between 2 points, say, or a jagged path you actually need to drive on a grid of streets. But all these distance metrics conform to 4 simple intuitions. And so these are the intuitions here. The distance from a point to itself is 0. All other distances are greater than 0. The distance from A to B is the same as the distance from B to A, which is symmetry. And the direct distance from A to C must be equal to or less than the indirect path, which goes from A to B and then B to C. This is the triangle inequality. So this is we talked about intransitivity a couple weeks ago. This is very similar to that. So these intuitions about distances are flexible, which lead you to different types of geometries. And then there are also ways to measure difference that don't obey the spatial logic. So you have things like Kullback-Leibler divergence, which are information theoretic measures that allow you to measure, that violate some of these principles of symmetry and the no shortcut rule. So these types of methods are good for looking at like humanities type data. And for example, the Kale divergence creates a measure more appropriate for epistemic relationships like novelty or surprise. And so we've talked about Bayesian surprise before. So that's interesting that they're contrasting that, or that they're mentioning that in terms of Kale divergence. And it'd be interesting to see if Kale divergence and like Bayesian information is, what the connections there are. But I don't know the answer right now. So they kind of go through some of these ideas. It's a really interesting paper because they go through a lot of these ideas and they kind of give you some useful mathematical models for this. So, if you go back to this CGS presentation, we did talk about some of these ideas, talk about transitivity and some of these other properties that get violated in our model here. So, our model of soft classification, it doesn't require a lot of these different basic rules of what we usually think of as like a closed set. So, there's a lot to build on here with respect to thinking about these representations as a space or as a geometry and how information is mapped onto it and how it's represented in a category. So, so I think that's all I wanted to talk about with respect to that area, but I think that's maybe food for thought for later. So, okay, so that's that. I wanted to talk about maybe a couple more papers before we go. We're kind of running up against time here. What is this paper? Okay, this is a paper that I found this week. I think Jesse would be interested in this, but other people as well. If you're interested in cybernetics, this is something, it's a historical perspective. It's something that came out, I saw it this week, on cybernetic systems biology and the phenomenological gap. So this person was studying biological control systems in graduate school. What they quickly noticed was that many of the most prominent people in the field seemed to have an incredible admiration for the ideas that grew out of Wiener's cybernetics movement. Not knowing any of the history, the term cybernetics sounded like something out of an early Isaac Asimov novel, then a research discipline. And then, though there was a clear admiration for the cybernetics of Wiener's work, that work, for the most part, was not directly incorporated in our curriculum or textbooks in the way the works of Bode, Shannon, and Nyquist were. And Nyquist had the sampling theorem, which talks about things like aliasing and that. Shannon, of course, is information theory. So there are these technical topics. Wiener filters and Wiener processes were covered, but a lot of engineering textbooks don't cover the history of these people and their ideas, which is actually sometimes a lot more fruitful. So what I took from this is that there must have been an interesting idea, but not something that was a central part of the rest of the theoretical framework for analyzing feedback systems. So this was a misconception that was built up based on how the textbooks look in this field. And so these misconceptions broke down when he stopped by the Caltech bookstore, which was having a sale to clear out old books. He found a copy of Cybernetics on Control and Communication and the Animal and Machine, which is something that I have and is a classic if you're interested in cybernetics. It's a historical book at this point, but it's very interesting, some of the ideas. If you go back to some of these old books again, you find really interesting ideas that have kind of been excluded from sort of the modern versions of where say cybernetics has been adapted. So it's been adapted to different fields of engineering, but they don't talk about a lot of the concepts that underlie, that are in this book. They just kind of like pick concepts and build upon them, but there are a lot of things that are sort of in the book that are, really interesting, but have never really been explored and developed. So once I began flipping through the pages, it started to become clear what I was getting wrong. While cybernetics was not taught explicitly in textbooks and courses, Wiener's ideas pervaded my education without me realizing it. The broad takeaway is that he believed that the revolution in control information and computing that was occurring in the middle of the 20th century was not limited to engineering problems, and many of the same insights could be applied to diverse topics such as neuroscience, physiology, and anthropology. Because he worked closely with domain experts, which are field experts, he realized that the feedback regulation was a core component of many natural and social systems. So this feedback is something you can see across fields, across systems, and it's just one of these very general concepts. And so he wanted to apply this as widely as possible. So some of this stuff, a lot of these, we've talked about how cybernetics is sort of declined as sort of a formal thing due to personal and political reasons. Some of these things, cybernetics became incredibly popular in the Soviet Union, which led to some largely irrational skepticism within the U.S. government about supporting the work. Some people decided they didn't want to work for the government, take government funding for weapons research. And so there are things like that that affected the development. But also, I don't know. These are just potential reasons why cybernetics kind of drifted into obscurity. He was amazed to find that papers from the 50s and 60s would be impressive enough if published today. It's interesting how these ideas have influenced experimental investigations without really being fleshed out as a formal theory. So it's interesting how these things kind of seeped into our modern world without really leaving the imprimatur of being, called cybernetics. So there are a lot of questions you can ask from a cybernetics framework, and there are a lot of things here. It goes through a number of different experiments and approaches that, are consistent with this idea. There's Norbert Wiener with his cybernetic moth. So we've talked about this in the lecture I gave on animats, I think last fall, where Norbert used to build these mechanical devices that were supposed to be like synthetic organisms, and so they're much bigger than what you might find in a lab today. But they had this sort of, they must look like vehicles, but they're supposed to be cybernetic organisms that incorporate a lot of these principles. So so there was a lot of stuff with respect to like animal behavior that you can test using these type of models. You have things in vision, you have other things that you can look at. So this is a long pin. There's also stuff like glucose pathways, and Jacques Monod, who is a molecular biologist, is sort of one of the fathers of molecular biology, but Monod was also interested in genetic circuits and creating these models of how genes are regulated. So that's where it's also been applied. So this is like historical work, kind of goes through some of these examples. And I think like this last part about building bridges. So Rob Phillips is someone at Caltech who's done a lot of stuff on this. I remember seeing a talk on this actually about figure 1 theory versus figure 7 theory, which is where you have this idea that in a lot of biology papers you have these figure 7s that are at the end of the paper that kind of summarize the paper's findings, but they're also kind of an attempted theory, which figure 7, of course, is like, the end of the paper, and you don't really spend a lot of time developing the theory. But figure 1 theory is actually maybe what we want, which is to say that, like, instead of just kind of summarizing things at the end, figure 1 theory kind of frames everything. And so it gives you this sort of explicit framework for things. So that's where maybe cybernetics can come into play in modern empirical research. And then also you have things, concepts like homeostasis and allostasis that are being explored in biology. It kind of goes through some of these people who are doing this now. And so I believe that for biology to really fulfill the dream of cybernetics, the phenomenologists will need to find ways to make measurements and perturbation so streamlined that doing what Phillips or else some odds groups did is no more complicated than plugging in different sets of resistors and capacitors into a breadboard circuit. So just kind of thinking about how to apply this to empirical work. But I also think that, I think that there's a lot to think about in terms of modeling, computational modeling, and how we can learn from cybernetics. And I know that we've talked about like cybernetics versus like some of these other statistical methods like Bayesianism and connectionism. And so there's maybe a role there to look at like more deeply at some of those things. So many thoughts on that?
I muted myself and was on camera awkwardly.
did.
That's great. I am really happy to find that paper. That's a paper that I probably would have wanted to write myself, so I'm going to take a deep dive on that afterwards. But I appreciate all of that. I think it ties in really well with the trajectory stuff in general. But that seems to be a great paper.
Yeah. So let me put the folder in the chat, and I'll put it in the Slack later, but should be shared with everyone. I don't think I have the same link there. Yeah, it's a different link. So it's the second link in the chat. And the papers are in there, all those the folders, and then there's that one paper. And I usually move the papers up from, like the ones we don't cover this week, I move them up to the next week. So I'll be moving those, but I'll keep the relevant ones in this folder. So yeah. It's really interesting. So this we have a theme this week. It's very sort of historical and sociological theme of fields and different topics like that. But I think that there's a lot to talk about in this area. And I'm not sure like what the answer is here. I guess it's like all about questions, right? Like if we ask questions about, like, in comparing cybernetics and Bayesianism, for example, if we can ask questions about what they have in common or what they have separate from one another, or with like KL divergence and like Bayesian surprise. So what are the things that they have in common that we might, draw from, or what are the things that they have that are different? That's a good starting point for really kind of getting into some interesting work and kind of thinking about how we're applying models, maybe how they're things that are maybe that people haven't never thought about before. So I think that's
Yes.
yeah. Anisha, did you have anything to add? Did you want to add anything before we go, or?
Nothing to add. Just thank you for a good meeting.
All right. Thanks for attending. So yes, thanks for attending, and I'll talk to everyone.